my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to the LO3 podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangoes of South Florida, and today's date is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. I know in my last episode I said Nullification 2020. My mistake. I did corrected it on that last episode. It's Nullification 2021. Okay, so apologize once again, folks. So yeah, I slip up also. The human element. Okay, so it looks like I was examining some stuff from the impeachment. And it's more like a crucifixion game, guilty till proven innocent. Very unmerited rhetoric out there. And a good amount of people have bought it. Hook, line, and sinker once again. When people take the initiative on seeing these claims, they still want to blame President Trump for what happened. You've been duped again, and again. Don't want to take the initiative on going a little further, examining videos from citizen journalists. Yeah, it's more than meets the eye, but many folks out there that still want to read the garbage on platforms. Oh, that's for sure. And I don't have to name them because many of my listeners can figure it out themselves. So, looks like it's another bill of attainder extravaganza, allegedly. I haven't really read the whole thing in its entirety, but I did use an insurrection. And like I said before, and I'll do it again. The insurrection was internal. The ones that are trying to overthrow the government are going after one man. That's right. With all due respect, folks, now I don't say it's out of malice or animosity, but with love and in good faith. When you've convinced me I'm wrong, please, if you dare. Well, this is what I want to be talking about right now. And I was listening to her show. I recommend everyone go to chrisannhall.com. All right, she is. I love her work. Husband's awesome. Very articulate dialogue, entertaining too, and educational. That's what I go for. Not the armchair political pundits. No. That to me, I could go to the bathroom and I get more inspired than that deceptive rhetoric. What I said when I addressed aforementioned, the armchair political pundits. All right, this is what Chris Ann Hall has to say. Did Trump incite a riot? A memorandum of law. And this is H.R. 24. It's interesting when she goes to the House, members of the House of Representatives from Chris Ann Hall and J.D. Reference to H.R. 24, impeachment of Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. This is on January 13th. Facts. On January 6, 2021, a group of Americans assembled in Washington, D.C., some to protest the counting of Electoral College votes they believe were cast as a result of a fraudulent election. Some to support President Trump, some to encourage the counting of Electoral College votes, some to protest President Trump, and some to simply create chaos and destruction, which many of us could say, agent provocateurs, regardless who it was. Okay, I'll be fair on that one. During this assembly, some in this assemblage chose to engage in violence that resulted in damage to the Capitol building and the loss of life. I think there's a few right now. A couple. During this assembly of multiple groups and individuals, including President Trump, gave a speech which transcripts are available. H.R. 24 articles of impeachment allege that the actions of those who carried out the violence are attributed to President Donald J. Trump due to words uttered at a rally and thus subjects him to legal and constitutional impeach from the pursuant to Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution for incitement of insurrection. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution reads, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Questions presented. Is Donald Trump guilty of incitement of insurrection by inciting violence against the United States? Is Donald Trump subject to impeachment and conviction according to the Constitution under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution for incitement of insurrection? Answer and discussion. Incitement has a very settled definition in law and standard is referred to as Brandenburg test as resulting from Brandenburg versus Ohio, which that case was 1969. The Brandenburg test was established in Brandenburg versus Ohio, 1969, to determine when inflammatory speech intending to advocate illegal action can be restricted. In Brandenburg, a KKK leader gave a speech at a rally, and after speaking a laundry list of racial slurs, Brandenburg then said, it's possible that there might have to come to be some revengeance taken. In this opinion, the Supreme Court held that the government can only infringe upon freedom of speech by criminalizing speech when a two-pronged standard created by this court is met. The standard is as follows. The speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and the speech is likely to incite or produce such action. Further, the Supreme Court opinions give specific direction on the application of the Brandenburg test. The Supreme Court in Hess versus Indiana, 1973, applied the Brandenburg test to a case in which an Indiana University protester said, "We'll take this fucking street again," or later. The Supreme Court held that the university protester's profanity was protected under the Brandenburg test as speech that amounted to nothing more than advocacy of illegal action at some indefinite future time. The court held that since there was no evidence or rational inference from the import of the language, that his words were intended to produce and likely to produce imminent disorder. Those words could not be punished by the state on the ground that they had a tendency to lead to violence. In NAACP versus Claiborne Company, Hardware Company, 1982, Mr. Evers made threats of violence against anyone who refused to boycott white businesses. The Supreme Court applied the Brandenburg test and found that Mr. Evers' speech was protected under the of freedom of speech. Strong and effective extemporaneous rhetoric cannot be nicely channeled in purely dulcet phrases. An advocate must be free to stimulate his audience with spontaneous and emotional appeals for unity and action in a common cause. When such appeals do not incite lawless action, they must be regarded as protected speech. The question is, did President Trump engage in speech that qualifies under the Brandenburg test as inciting? The only relevant evidence in this accusation will be the transcript of President Trump's speech. And there's a link for that too. In this transcript, we see no language that fits the Brandenburg test definition of inciting. What a reader of this transcript will find, we have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. There's a link for that, folks. You can verify it yourself. All you Trump haters out there. Guilty till proven innocent. Bunch of Trump haters have this Jim Crow fetish, right? Hang them first, ask questions later. So, and as I continue on here, using the Brandenburg test as established by the Supreme Court of the United States, it must be concluded that President Donald Trump's speech did not raise to the criminal level of inciting, consistent with the Supreme Court's opinions. The speaker over a group cannot be held accountable for the actions of that group unless the speaker directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and the speech is likely to incite or produce such action. It is highly dubious to assert that directing a crowd to peacefully and patriotically make your voice heard incites violence and insurrection. There can be a disagreement as to the appropriate nature of President Trump's words in general. There cannot be a disagreement as to the statement made in his speech, since they are recorded and freely available. So all you assumptionaholics, do a little homework before flapping your gums. A lot of people are good at that. A bunch of beakers and heat, you know? So, this is the only reasonable and moral way to maintain the essential standard of freedom of speech as enshrined in the United States Bill of Rights. Any standard that deviates from this test in favor of criminalizing speech ought to be unacceptable in a nation built upon the essential principles of personal liberty. The Supreme Court held in Texas versus Johnson, 1989, that freedom of speech is a bedrock principle underlining the First Amendment is that government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable. In Rav, which is RAV versus St. Paul, 1992, the court held that even hate speech is protected under these terms of the First Amendment. Finally, the Supreme Court held in Gregory versus Chicago, 1969, to let policemen's command become equivalent to a criminal statute comes dangerously near making our government one of men rather than of laws. There are simple ways to protect the domestic tranquility while subjecting First Amendment freedoms to such a clumsy and unwieldy weapon. To allow disagreement over words and meanings, to allow political dissension to become the standard of criminal activity violates the Constitution and the standards established by the Supreme Court. Transmutes America away from the land of those foundation is settled in due process and the rule of law to the clumsy and unwieldy weapon of politicians, mob rule, and arbitrary standards that are antithetical to everything that embodies our constitutional republic. Because President Donald Trump's speech does not meet the two-pronged test as established by the Supreme Court, it must be concluded that his speech has not risen to the level of criminal activity, since the standards of due process lead us to conclude that no crime was committed. The House impeachment accusation is unlawful, and there is no violation of a high crime or misdemeanor. Finally, because the criminal elements of inciting are not met, President Trump cannot be lawfully convicted by the Senate at trial. And she's absolutely correct, because I have verified the information on especially the video footage, raw, unfiltered, said the same thing. prima facie just cause. What happened to President Trump is null and void. And I call it a bit of a retainer based on especially how they present themselves. All the clowns, the quacks, the illiterates, the treasonous scumbags, excuse my language, but that's how I look at them. Psychic vampires think they're all above everybody else. All been stripped naked. Congratulations. Proves one thing, you're all unfit. The ones that did this impeachment supported it. All the Democrats, including those 10 Republicans, proved one thing. You breached your oath of office. Plain and simple, no exceptions, no ends, ifs, or buts. And all you individuals out there that may get your rocks off by having President Trump be impeached twice, I'll give you 2 Federalist Papers to read if you want to educate yourselves. Federalist Papers 65 and 84. If I'm correct, they're both by Alexander Hamilton. Impeachment and due process. He warned us about this, how political parties will use it for personal gain. I don't have to really put it on here. Look it up. Use your brains. All you keyboard warriors. And look it up. Before you throw your baseless rhetoric around me. Because I'll be laughing at every single one of you. There's not a damn thing you can do. You talking to a man that's not even a Trump worshiper. Okay? I have my disagreements on the great amount of his actions. But you folks out there, supports double standards, proves one thing. You're fraudulent. If you don't know about your rights, you say you're born in this country, denounce your citizenship and leave because you're invalid. If you get offended by it, who the hell cares? Because you're responsible for your actions, not me. Well, enough of the rhetoric on that. Other words, I'll add one more. She said arbitrary. You could add discriminatory or in bad faith. That's it on that aspect. Do one more here, which is pretty damn cool. I like this one. And this came out about a week ago, which, my crap, I wish I would have known about this, yeah. But it's by Mike Maher. It came out on the 9th, by the way. New evidence, Kentucky resolutions of 1798 were all about nullification. 10th Amendment Center, by the way, great site. Says here, nullification skeptics will often argue that the Kentucky resolutions of 1798 weren't actually proposing nullification. They based their argument on the fact that John Breckinridge removed specific references to nullification from Jefferson's draft before he introduced it in the Kentucky House. But evidence from the debates in the House reveals that the resolutions were absolutely intended to set the stage for nullification, and all of the representatives who voted to pass them and knew it. In his original draft, Jefferson specifically asserted a state's right to nullify unconstitutional acts. It says here, therefore this Commonwealth is determined, as it doubts not its co-states are to submit to undelegated and unconsequently unlimited powers in no man or body of men on earth, that in cases of an abuse of the delegated powers, the members of the general government being chosen by the people A change by the people would be the constitutional remedy. But where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. That every state has a natural right in cases not within the compact, casus non foederis, to nullify of their own authority all assumptions of power by others within their limits. That without this right, they would be under the dominion, absolute and unlimited, of whatsoever might exercise this right of judgment for them. Jefferson sent former Virginia ratifying convention delegate Wilson Carey Nicholas a draft of the resolution, likely hoping that the state legislature could get them introduced in Virginia. In October 1798, Wilson indicated that State Representative John Breckinridge was willing to introduce the resolutions in Kentucky. Breckinridge suffered from tuberculosis and made a recuperative trip to Sweet Springs, Virginia, in late August of that year. Nicholas likely gave the Kentucky lawmaker a copy of Jefferson's draft during that trip. One moment. On November 8th, 1798, Breckinridge introduced an amended version of Jefferson's draft. Most notably, Breckinridge omitted the specific nullification language from the actual version, considered by the Kentucky legislature seeking to moderate the tone of the resolutions. Those who deny the legitimacy of state nullification seize upon the omission of the nullification language as proof that Breckinridge didn't actually believe the state had the power to nullify and was unwilling to present resolutions to that effect to the state legislature. I have always contended that even without the specific language, the resolution still laid the foundation for nullification. By declaring the Alien and Seditions Act unconstitutional and declaring that it is not law but it is altogether void and of no force. Breckinridge presented the Kentucky legislature with nullification resolution, even with the actual word omitted. His motives for removing the direct reference to nullification were purely political. Anger over the Alien Seditions Act was so intense that there were some calls for violent action against the federal government. As a first step, Breckinridge wanted to talk a line between making a strong case for Kentucky's right to act while maintaining a moderate tone. But during a debate on the House floor, recorded by the Frankfurt Palladium, Breckinridge made it absolutely clear that the resolutions were supporting a case, nullification, and he specifically used the word. Representative William Murray was one of the few Federalist Party members in the Kentucky House. He made a speech in opposition to the resolutions on the House floor, arguing that it wasn't the state legislature's job to censure Congress and that it had no authority to declare a duly enacted law unconstitutional. Breckinridge forcefully responded in a speech of his own, saying, "The legislature is the constitutional and proper organ through which the will of the people is known, and known effectually executed on ordinary occasions." He went on to ask a poignant question. If Congress received no censure from the state legislature, from whom is the censure to come? In fact, when the people have protested the Alien Seditions Act in various county assemblies, the Federalist Party supporters have accused them from raising tumultuous mobs. Sounds familiar, right? Tumultuous mobs. Breckinridge, went further, arguing that Congress was not the lords and masters of the states. He quipped, The doctrine of passive obedience and non-resistance has grown rather unfashionable and obsolete to be now revived. Breckinridge said his hope was that upon the representations of the state legislators, Congress would expunge the unconstitutional proceedings from the annals of the United States, but he went on to say if Congress attempted to enforce the Aliens and Sedition Acts, that it was the right and the duty of the several states to nullify those acts and to protect their citizens from their operation. Breckinridge made this speech in front of a full House that proves beyond a doubt that Breckinridge understood the resolutions to justify nullification. In fact, the intent of introducing them was to set the stage for further action in Congress, failed to repeal the onerous laws, and everybody in the legislative body knew this because they heard Breckinridge's defense of the resolutions. The resolution passed the House on November 10th with only 3 dissenting votes. The state unanimously concurred 3 days later, and Governor James Garrard signed the resolution on November 16th. The day after Garrard signed the resolutions, Jefferson sent a draft to James Madison, writing, "I enclose you a copy of the draft of the Kentucky Resolves. I think we should distinctly affirm all the important principles they contain, so as to hold to that ground in future, and leave the matter in such a train that as we may not be committed absolutely to push the matter to extremities, and yet maybe to push as far as events will render prudent." Kentucky followed up with a second resolution affirming its position in 1799, notably the word nullification omitted in the final version of the Kentucky Resolution of 1798, passed by the state legislature. Several states who formed that instrument, the Constitution, being sovereign and independent, have the unquestionable right to judge of its infraction, and that a nullification by these sovereignties of all unauthorized acts done under the color of that instrument is the rightful remedy. Well, that's very cool, I would say, my friends. Mike Meharry, he always does good work. And I tell folks, please support 10th Amendment Center and Chris Ann Hall. I learned something today. So everything can be done. Here's the thing, folks. And those states have certain resolutions and counties, even from the Patriot Act, can use any law that's considered an impairing contract from the federal government, is considered unconstitutional, can say, nope, we're not going to enforce it. So everyone wigging out about what's going to happen with the gun community, free speech and all that, the states could say, we're not going to work with you. And Phyllis Papers 46, written by James Madison, talked about not cooperating. And there's multiple anti-commandeering doctrines. Many cases pertaining to nullification. I did it in the last show. Some past shows. You can look it up. I try to have the titles in there. You can figure it out for yourself. So, very good stuff. This is why the centralized hacks don't want you to know. All those constitutional illiterates, whether they're registered voters, elected servants, appointed bureaucrats, they hate it when you know these things. Knowledge is power. Blatant ignorance is enslavement. And hopefully, folks, you learned something today on this episode, because I have. And that will be it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or something interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to the core. Furthermore, I'll leave these 2 footnotes of this episode of my Spreaker page. If you want to donate, not donate, but if you want to email me, contact me, you can hit me at lokiluck3@gmail.com or lokiluck03@protonmail.com. If you want to do a donation, you can get me on paypal.me or cash.app/LokiLuck3. Once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. May your guardian spirits be with you.